Game Day Garage presents Campus Blitz with PJ Glasser and Ryan Horvath.
Welcome in Game Day Garage's Campus Blitz. I'm PJ Glasser. Ryan Horvath out sick today, so it'll just be me solo, but excited for today's episode. We previewed the ACC, the Big 12. Today we preview the SEC. We got 9 great guests on over the next 90 minutes to talk about some of these teams in the SEC, and we will start things off with Alabama. Wyatt Fulton joins me, host of the Deep South College Football Show. Give Wyatt a follow on X at FultonW_. Wyatt, appreciate you joining me, man. What's going on?
PJ, thank you for having me, man. Excited to talk a little Alabama football as the season's getting closer.
Man, always excited. Roll Tide, good to be with you. You know I'm a Bama grad, so I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Let's start with the big question, because all these top college football teams this year, they either got a quarterback that's returning, or it could be like an LSU's case where they got a guy like Sam Leavitt who's played some college ball and he transfers in. Bama's kind of one of those top teams where it's a big question mark at QB. It's either going to be Austin Mack, Keelan Russell. If they had to play a game tomorrow, who do you think the starting quarterback would be for the Tide?
I think it would be Austin Mack, just because he's the guy that, is that veteran. He's got, a little bit more experience than what Keelan Russell's got, and he's been in the system for a couple of seasons. But I will say, I do think as of right now, it is a slight lean towards Austin Mack, but I think by the time we get through the first couple of scrimmages, it could be Keelan Russell. And I do think it ends up being Keelan Russell just because of the dynamic aspect that he brings to this offense. Austin Mack is a very good quarterback, but he maybe isn't quite up to the same level as Keelan Russell when it comes to getting outside of the pocket and making plays at a high percentage outside of the pocket. But right now, if they were playing on, August the 13th, I do think Austin Mack would get the start.
Okay, very interesting. They kick off the season against East Carolina week 1 and then have an SEC game week 2 on the road at Kentucky. Wyatt, I've been telling people, I think the 2 biggest question marks for Bama this season, especially on offense, is quarterback and then offensive line, because they couldn't run the ball last year. They had issues protecting. They revamped it a little bit in the offseason. So what do you expect that new look O-line to look like this year?
I expect the new look offensive line to take a step in the right direction. Now, that's not to say Alabama's going to go out and run for, 190 yards a game. That's not at all what they're going to be doing this season. But you averaged 104 yards per game in the run game last season. Against Power 4 competition, that number dropped to like 84 or something like that. So not good. But you're expecting that to take a step in the right direction with the addition of Adrian Clem, the former Oregon, New England Patriot, and Pittsburgh Steeler offensive line coach, and you bring in 11 new faces. So this is a run game that there's going to be some growing pains throughout the season. I expect them to struggle against, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas A&M, just because they bring really, really good defensive lines to the table that, do a really good job of stopping the run. But I don't expect them to struggle in the run game against inferior competition, much inferior competition, like an East Carolina will be in week number 1. No disrespect to the Pirates, but the talent level isn't quite the same as what it is in Tuscaloosa. And another good thing is everybody on this offensive line has eligibility for next season. They could theoretically come back. So an offensive line unit that's been regressing for the last, I'd say, 5 years since that 2020 national championship, an offensive line unit that has been viewed as a weakness for 5-6 consecutive seasons now suddenly might be one of your biggest strengths in 2027, but you got to get through 2026 first.
Yeah, no doubt. Another guy that Bama's going to need to step up this year on offense is Ryan Williams. He was unbelievable for much of the year as a freshman. Last year, disappointed compared to expectation. How has he looked so far in camp and the rest of this wide receiver group?
Ryan Coleman Williams has looked really, really good to start camp. They're really excited for what he can bring to the table as a junior. And sophomore slumps is not unheard of, right? There's a reason it's called a sophomore slump. And Alabama receivers have had that kind of in the past, right? Julio Jones was much better as a freshman and a junior than he was a sophomore. Amari Cooper had a really big slump as a sophomore and then was unstoppable as a junior. Calvin Ridley the same way. So I'm not saying he's, the next Amari Cooper, the next Julio Jones, but I do think you see Ryan Coleman Williams take a step in the right direction. One of the biggest criticisms around him has been catching with his body and not with his hands at wide receiver. And it looks like through the limited fall camp practices that we've been able to see and what we've been hearing out of fall camp is that that's what he's worked on. He's catching the ball with his hands and he's getting in space. And he's been one of the toughest players for Kane Womack's defensive group to go out and guard this fall camp. And so I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table, but it's not just him, right? It's Latsier Brooks, the guy who, kind of burst onto the scene on a national stage in that college football playoff game against Oklahoma, right? And behind him, it's, you need somebody to take that step as that third wide receiver. Is it a Derek Meadows who played some good reps but didn't catch a single pass last season? Is it a freshman in Sedarian Morgan? Is it Rico Scott, who's kind of been the forgotten guy in that wide receiver room? Because we'd all penciled in NC State transfer Noah Rogers to be that guy, that third wide receiver. And then he suffers a very unfortunate injury on A-Day. He's going to be out, for the first probably half of the season. But you can't just run out there with two wide receivers right now. You've got to have that third guy ready to go for week one.
Defensively, this secondary, I think, might be the best in the country. They bring back everybody. They should be really, really good this year. Have they looked as good as advertised so far through camp?
I'd almost say they look better than advertised so far through camp, which is a great thing to hear if you're an Alabama fan. Xavier Brown, Dijon Lee, two lockdown corners on those far sides. They're in the deep secondary. You've got Bray Hubbard, who's back for another season. Keon Sabb's back for another year. I'd keep an eye on Red Morgan at that, star Husky nickel corner position. He's somebody that's been unstoppable so far through fall camp. Ryan Grubb said he's been an absolute force to be reckoned with going up against his offense in practice. And then even behind that, the two deep, where you've got, a five-star in Jordan Edmonds. You've got Chuck McDonald, South California kid out there. You've got Ivan Taylor, who I think would probably start at 90% of other schools in the country. He's sitting on Alabama's two deep right now. Xavier Mincy as well as another guy that came in with that Xavier Brown class, and Jalen Mbakwe at the time. Xavier Mincy's another guy that came in and did a lot of really good things in spurts, and he's going to be playing, that backup role to Keon Sabb. And that's not even mentioning the fact that Jaira Edwards, a five-star freshman from Maryland, has been, again, unstoppable so far through fall camp, and is somebody that Alabama's going to have to figure out, hey, how do we get this guy on the field? Because good ball play, you don't keep good ball players off the field. And so far through camp, Jaira Edwards has been a very, very good ball player. And then you've also got the Mercer transfer, Carmelo O'Neal, who Kane Womack said came in a little bit athletically ahead of schedule and has really taken to the fact that Alabama likes to rotate. Alabama likes those big, long, lengthy defenders. And he's another guy that he might be the biggest defensive back in that room just from a height perspective and a length perspective. And you don't keep good ball players off the field. Carmelo O'Neal's another guy that Alabama's going to have to find a way to get some snaps this fall.
Wyatt, I keep going back and forth on, 9-3, 10-2 this season. I think everybody's kind of looking at those four games, the home game against Georgia and A&M, and then the road trips to Knoxville and LSU. It feels like the other 8, they probably should take care of business. Maybe they do lose one of those games. In DeBoer's first couple of years, they have lost some games that necessarily people didn't think they would. But I'm somewhere in between 9-3, 10-2. How would you look at their schedule this year?
I'm looking at it the same way, 9-3, 10-2. If you're not 5-0 through the first 5 games, I think that, there's some people are going to be ready to hit that panic button. And because they've struggled with those quote unquote inferior competition, right? Like they go out and they lose to Vandy in year number 1, despite the offense, not really being slowed down in a 35-point game, or when they scored 35 in that game. Tennessee, they go up to Knoxville and control most of that first half, only come out with 7 points, and you end up losing that game. They go to Norman, Oklahoma against a team that was really struggling in the Sooners, and yet Alabama comes out and just lays a complete egg and, can't get a victory over a 500 team in that first season. And then not even mention the fact that, in the bowl game, Michigan had 1 or 2 passing yards in the second half and still won that football game against Alabama. And then last year, right, Florida State, you get the break speed off of you by an inferior team. And then Georgia and Indiana in the SEC championship and in the college football playoff, you get your teeth kicked in. So I think that's the biggest thing is you're going to lose games. That's just college football nowadays with the transfer portal and NIL. You're going to lose football games. Don't get your teeth kicked in, right? Don't go out and lose by 35 in a playoff game, right? That's what fans want to see. And so I think, being competitive in those bigger games, the Georgias, going to Neyland Stadium again, Texas A&M coming to Tuscaloosa this season, be competitive in those games. And yeah, you still want to win those games, but then don't go out and lose to a Vanderbilt, right? Don't go out and lose to a team that's fighting for bowl eligibility. So Kentucky's going to tell me a lot in week number 2 about what this Alabama team is this season. Have they kind of adjusted and fixed some of the things some of the criticisms of Kalen DeBoer so far? Because if they go out against Kentucky, who with a new head coach, new playmakers on offense, You expect Alabama to win that game pretty handedly. If they go out and it's a one-score win, I'm a little nervous about Alabama, especially when you look at that Starkville road trip the week before Georgia with Kamario Taylor, Kelly Jones, Fluff Bothwell, Anthony Evans on Mississippi State's roster there. So, but week 2 against Kentucky, that's going to tell me a lot about what Alabama and Kalen DeBoer are doing this year.
Wyatt, in about a minute before I let you leave, do you think this Bama team is good enough to win it all this year?
Good enough, yes. Experienced enough, no. I think the lack of experience on the offensive side of the football is going to rear its ugly head at some point for this Alabama team. But the talent's absolutely there. And again, you're only projected to lose one guy on offense to the NFL draft, and that's Ryan Coleman Williams. So in 2027, all that talent is still there, minus one guy. Now, that one guy is very talented, but all that talent is still in the room in Tuscaloosa on offense. And defensively, you're going to have a lot of guys, shuffle in and out with Yanze Pierre in the secondary. But Alabama does such a good job of rotating that, yeah, they're going to lose starters, but they're not going to lose a ton of snaps, right? So 2026, talented enough? Yes. Experienced enough? No. 2027 is the year that I look at and say, hey, that's the year that Alabama is really making the push for the national championship.
All right, very good. Great stuff. Wyatt Fulton, host of the Deep South College Football Show, and give him a follow on X at FultonW_. Wyatt, appreciate the time, man. Have a great season, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Appreciate you, brother. Have a good one.
Yes, sir. All right, from the Tide, we go to the Sooners. Welcome on Jenny Carlson, sports columnist for the Oklahoman. Give Jenny a follow on X at JennyCarlson_OK. Jenny, always great talking Sooners with you. How's everything going? As we're about 3-4 weeks here till the start of the season.
I know. Can we have a game sooner rather than later would be my only hope. Yeah, it's a lot of talking right now, but things are really good, and I think hopes are high in Norman.
Well, Jenny, last time we saw the Sooners take the field, it was on their home field against Alabama, and things were rolling 17-0. Are they still talking about that game? Like, is Brent Venables, any of the players, like, has that motivated them going into this season, knowing that they were in control of that game before they really let it slip away?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be some level of motivation for them. Obviously, last season, this time a year ago, people were wondering is Oklahoma football headed in the right direction? Is Brent Venables the right coach for this team? They were coming off a losing year. So to see them make the college football playoff was obviously huge. Their defense, I think, became what a lot of people thought it could become under Brent Venables, which was a dominant, game-changing defense. So I think that they felt really good getting there regardless of outcome. But pretty clearly, I think that game just became very indicative of their biggest problem. And that was the fact that their offense just became very stalled the second half of the season. And I think a lot of it goes back to John Mateer's hand injury. He has that hand injury in the Michigan game, comes back 17 days later to play in that Texas game, which is obviously, you can't undersell the toughness that had to take because his hand's bleeding. You can see the blood, what's happening. So I think physically it was definitely, a huge thing that he did for that team coming back. But he was never quite the same. And I think it was physical and I think it was mental. And then they had a running game that was just almost non-existent. I looked at the numbers, PJ, and they had less rushing yards last season than they had in the COVID-shortened season of 2020. Just an unbelievable lack of running game at a place that is one of the best in the country for running backs. So they absolutely have to get that going. But that Alabama game, that really became a microcosm of everything that was wrong with that team a year ago.
Mateer's so fascinating this year, Jenny, because this time last year, right, he was coming over from Washington State with Ben Arbuckle, and so many people were talking about, Oklahoma's with their defense. If they can get a quarterback like Mateer, they could be national title good. You mentioned he had to deal with that hand injury and just was really never quite himself. From what you've seen so far, as he started to look kind of like the John Mateer that people thought he was going to be coming over from Washington State. And do you get the feeling that like he has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder trying to prove some people wrong? Because it feels like, a lot of people kind of are just pushing him out for dead this year.
Yeah, and there was even talk at the end of last season among some OU fans is like, well, if he decides to go to the NFL or maybe even looks to transfer, I don't know that people were necessarily thinking it was the worst thing in the world, which was shocking to me because I really do think last season was a lot about that injury. And, he always said, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And I get that. I think he physically probably was okay, but I just think mentally there were effects of that injury. I think we saw it. He just wasn't as sharp. He wasn't as definitive. He didn't always make the throws that seemed open and obvious. So I think that a lot of it became between the ears as opposed to with his hand. So I think now having an off season where he can get more comfortable, I think we're going to see a closer version of John Mateer, the Washington State quarterback, the quarterback, frankly, that led Oklahoma to a victory against Michigan a year ago and had people talking about Heisman Trophy before we found out he'd broken that bone in his hand. So I think we're going to see more of that guy. And also, I think if you look at who's around him, they've beefed up the wide receiver position. Parker Livingstone coming over from Texas, Terrell Harris coming from Virginia, adding to Isaiah Satania, who's returning. And again, they thought might test the NFL waters. So they felt really good about him. And then if the season started today, I think their starting running back would be Lloyd Avant from Colorado State. And then they've got two other guys returning in Xavier Robinson and Torrey Blaylock, who are experienced and were as successful as anybody in the run game a year ago. Now they're going to need to step it up. Dylan McCullough takes over that position. He was with the Raiders a year ago, and they're let's see, how do we say it nicely? Their sieve of an offensive line, if you will. So the fact that they got any production out of their run game, I think speaks to some of the stuff that McCullough did. So they're going to have to be better, but I think there's more talent at the skill positions this year than there was a year ago around John Mateer, and that has to mentally help him as well.
Yeah, it's a good note about the receiving room because, like you said, they did bring in a bunch of transfers to hopefully shore that up. Jenny, I think, again, so much of the talk was about Mateer. It was lost in how many different O-line combinations OU had to go through last year. In their first 9 games, they had to use 7 different guys. So they've also brought in a bunch of new bodies to shore up that offensive line. How do they feel about how that group has looked so far? Have they gelled quicker than they thought? Because like you said, all these new pieces, running back, wide receiver, but they definitely have a lot of new faces on the O-line as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they love Amarian Harris, the right guard who came over from Arkansas. He's a 5th-year guy, big, talented, lots of starts. I think that's going to be a huge addition. And then, honestly, the thing that's probably gotten them most excited are guys like Michael Fasusi and Ryan Foje, who are no longer freshman offensive linemen in the SEC. I mean, let's be honest. That is playing offensive line as a true freshman is tough in any league. But when you're trying to do that in the SEC, it's extremely difficult. Now, they like those two guys an awful lot. Fasusi, their left tackle, Foje, their right guard. But they're going to, their right guard. Harris is going to play right tackle for them. But I mean, I think the experience, and then if they can keep guys healthy, I think that's going to be the real key. But I think they're still trying to figure out some of those other spots, who fits best, where they fit best. Bill Bedenbaugh, their offensive line coach, has had great success over the time he's been in Norman, producing NFL caliber offensive linemen. You can find them all around the NFL. But they've struggled in the last few years. They've had some injuries, some untimely things that really have derailed them. But if they can get this group together and healthy, I think they've got as much talent on this offensive line as they probably had in a while. And if they can bring it together, I think that to me is, yes, Mateer is a big question, but I think that'll get worked out. But offensive line, to me, when you're looking at the offense, to me, that's the biggest of the questions for OU this year.
No doubt. And look, we talked about that defense at the top and how great they were last year. Do you expect them to be as good this year? Could they potentially be even better? Like, is there a position group that maybe is a little bit of a question mark for the defense this season?
Yeah, it's interesting. They lost some pieces, no doubt about it. I mean, whether you're talking about Kobe McKenzie, who was one of their linebacker starters, a captain a year ago, a guy that made a lot of plays for them. He transfers and you think, oh boy, what are they going to do at linebacker? Well, they bring in Cole Sullivan from Michigan. And by all accounts, he is a beast. He has been fantastic. He's learned the defense well. Now, I don't know exactly if he's going to start, to be quite honest, because when Owen Heineke got granted another year of eligibility, that's the position that Sullivan was likely to play. So it's likely that he's going to be in some sort of linebacker rotation. But even that linebacker spot, losing a guy like McKenzie, they bring back Kip Lewis, who I think is poised to have a big year, Reggie Powers, and then Owen Heineke. So, and you add in Cole Sullivan. So I think that linebacker position continues to be more and more of what Brent Venables wants out of his linebackers, which is a position that goes and makes plays and affects the game, doesn't stand back and wait for the play to come to them. They go and they really attack. So I think that they like that position. I think defensive line is always going to be a spot where you have to always want more talent, more depth. When you're talking about the SEC, sort of in the same way, it's tough to be a true freshman offensive lineman in the SEC and go against defensive lines. It's tough to go against these SEC offensive lines. So while they love Taylor Wine, obviously had a huge breakout year defensive end, their other starting end position, is it going to be Danny Okoye? Is it going to be PJ Adebaware? No R. Mason Thomas. He was hurt a good chunk of last year, so they operated without him, which I think probably helps ease their mind a little bit about moving forward without him. But they've got good starters at the tackle spots and David Stone and Jaden Jackson, but then who spells them? How does that rotation work? I think that's still a little bit of a question, but I think they like the bodies they have there. It's just figuring out who fits best. So the secondary is probably the group that is most sure. I think you've got the Bowen brothers, Eli and Peyton, then Cortland Gilroy, a true freshman a year ago, got a ton of experience. And then safety, Michael Boganowski, will probably be those four in the secondary. I think they feel very solid about that group. And I think the defense overall, they feel good about. It's just sort of repositioning some of those guys that are taking over, that are stepping into new roles. But they took such a huge step a year ago. I think the confidence has to be there that they're figuring this out. They know how to play Brent Venables' defense, which is no easy thing. And now they're just ready to take that next step and continue the dominance and maybe even take it a step further.
Yeah, they were awesome last year. And they're as long as Venables is there, they're probably going to be pretty good on that side of the ball. Jenny, we've done an ACC, a Big 12 preview so far, and now we're doing SEC today. I haven't asked any of our guests about their kicker, but I got to ask you because the Lou Groza Award winner, Tate Sandell, is coming back. He's the best kicker in college football. He went 8 for 9 from 50 plus last year. And what a weapon, right? Especially in the SEC when the margin of error is so slim. All these teams, there's really not that big of a gap. Is he still as automatic as what he was last year? Could we see him kick for maybe 60 yards this year? What's kind of the scouting report on Sandell?
Mr. Short Shorts, you mean? Mr. Yes, Daisy Dukes?
Exactly. Short shorts.
Yeah, became so well known a year ago after that Tennessee game when apparently he ripped his pants. That was the word on the street. I don't know if I believe that. I think he just wears his pants as shorts, which whatever, do your thing. Yeah, but yes, he was an unexpected huge bright spot for this team a year ago. I don't think anybody expected him to be as automatic as he became. The fact that he missed some kicks in that Alabama playoff game was frankly shocking, quite honestly. He'd just been so automatic. I think that probably was one of those things that, it affects the confidence. Kickers, a lot of it is confidence. And so I'm sure that he had to go back out and sort of reestablish his confidence. But, I think the body of work he had a year ago, he has to feel really good about that. And the Sooners have to feel good about it as well. When you've got the ability to go get points, even if your offense stalls, I think in the SEC, that's just so huge. The margin for error is so slim, and for a very long time, Oklahoma really hasn't had that ability to, feel like, okay, we're at the 30, maybe even back from there. We can just kick it. We can get points from this position. It's been a while since they've had that. And I think in this league, points are so valuable. I think having Tate Sandell and his distance, his length, to me, that's huge. I think if they can, even if he's not to the level of a year ago, if he's somewhere in that ballpark, that's just such a valuable weapon for them. And I know that they'll take advantage of it.
Jenny, I'll leave you with this. Ever since OU has joined the SEC, their schedule's been tough, and this year's no different. You mentioned they had the big win against Michigan and Norman last year. This year, they'll make the return trip to Ann Arbor. They also got Georgia on the road, Florida on the road. Of course, they play Texas at the Cotton Bowl, Ole Miss and A&M at home. So it's a gauntlet. Yet again, the schedule is tough. What do you think? Do the Sooners get back to the playoff this year? Do you see 9-3? What would be your prediction at this point?
Yeah, and you mentioned that tough schedule. The first 2 years in the SEC, they paired up, Texas and Oklahoma when they came into the league, and everybody knew that OU got a really tough schedule, but it was like, okay, year 3, it's going to get better. And then the league decides to go to 9 games and said, never mind, Oklahoma, here's another tough schedule. Thank you very much for coming to our conference. So yes, they do have a very, very difficult schedule. I mean, I think 9-3 is very realistic. They got to go to Michigan and win. Obviously, it's a tough place to win, but the turmoil in the offseason with Michigan, I think Oklahoma takes a better team to Ann Arbor, and I think they need to go win that game because, like you said, then it's not very long before they're headed off to Athens, then Texas down in the Cotton Bowl. So they need to get some early momentum, really get that offense going. I think figure out what they can do, how they can do it, how they can move the ball, let some of those new faces that are coming in on defense get comfortable. But yeah, I mean, I think 9-3 is possible. I wouldn't be surprised at 10-2, but PJ, in this league, there's no easy game. Okay. Kentucky and or Mississippi State likely to be easier games on the schedule. But even at that, you just never know in this league. I mean, I think that's the reality. So I'm going to go 9-3, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe even climb a little higher than that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's going to be an interesting year for Oklahoma. They should be a really good team yet again. Jenny Carlson, sports columnist for the Oklahoman. Give her a follow on X at Jenny Carlson _OK. Jenny, appreciate all the time. Great insight as always on OU. Have a great season, and hope to talk to you again soon.
All right, thanks, PJ. Appreciate it.
You got it. Great stuff from Jenny. All right, we'll wait to talk some Auburn here in a little bit with Peter Returkis, who's going to join us. Some guests that we don't have on the show today. We don't have anybody on to talk Ole Miss or Texas A&M, which probably is the two biggest teams that we did not get a guest for. Ole Miss is going to be interesting this year. Their win totals at about 8.5. They do have a tough schedule. All eyeballs, of course, will be on that LSU game in week 3. They also got a road trip at Florida, at Texas, at Oklahoma, and they get Georgia and Auburn at home. They also play Louisville in week 1 in Nashville, which I think could be a tricky game. I think they could be on upset alert in that one. Chambliss might be the best quarterback in the SEC, maybe the best quarterback in the country. I mean, he is that good. So that'll be fun to watch him again. And that's obviously huge for Ole Miss that he was granted that extra year. But it's going to really come down to the defense for Ole Miss. Pete Golding is now in his first full season as head coach. Defense is his specialty. But Ole Miss is going to score points. It's really going to come down to that defense. And if they can find a way to win some of these big road games, because again, it's not easy to win in the swamp. It's going to be tough at Texas and at Oklahoma as well. They're going to have to win one of those games at least if they want to make the college football playoff. So it'll be a big year for the Sooners. And then for Texas A&M, look, I'm down on the Aggies this season. I'm a fan of Mike Elko. I think he's a really good coach, but Marcel Reed, I just don't think is as great as everybody else does. And I think he's going to really miss having his offensive coordinator from last year in Colin Klein, who's now the head coach at Kansas State. Reed's a terrific athlete. He's got unbelievable speed, but he's very inconsistent as a passer. And we saw last year when he had to play up in competition against Texas and Miami, he struggled. They lost those games. And this year, the schedule much tougher for Texas A&M. So I would fade the Aggies this year, look under the win total, and look for them to miss the college football playoff as well. But let's talk some Auburn Tigers. There's a lot of excitement down on the plains this season. And joining me now is Peter Returkis, Auburn beat writer for AL.com. Give Peter a follow on X at Peter_Returkis. And Peter, let's start, man, with the head coach, Alex Golesh, who I'm a big fan of. He did a great job at USF. It's been tough sledding for the Tigers in these last couple coaching hires. Harsin, Hugh Freeze hasn't quite gone the way that they would have wanted. Do they feel like they have maybe found their guy now in Alex Golesh?
I think they definitely feel that way, but, I'm sure there were people who felt that way after the last two hires as well. But, I always say when it comes to new coaches, I think everybody is optimistic and everybody feels good when it's, they haven't played any games yet. But I do think that Alex Golesh has done all the things that you're supposed to do in your first offseason. There hasn't really been much to, I guess, look at or brought a lot of negative publicity to the program. He's done what he's supposed to do on the recruiting trail. Did what he's supposed to do in the portal is, made the program look good every time he's been in front of a microphone, in front of a camera. So I think so far, there's definitely plenty of reason to be optimistic.
He brings over his quarterback with him from South Florida, Byron Brown, who was one of the best group of 5 quarterbacks last season. How do they feel about him making the jump, going from the American Conference to the SEC, dealing with that grind, that physicality? How has he looked so far in camp? What have been your impressions so far, Byron Brown?
Yeah, I think everybody in the building is confident in Byron. He's a guy who has been Alex Golesh's starting quarterback for the last 3 years. All 3 of Golesh's seasons at USF, was obviously really talented there, really productive there as well. In terms of making the jump, I don't think there's too much worry in that. Every time that gets mentioned, they always point to, the Florida game last season where USF went to beat them. Obviously, Florida was not a very good team last season, but, that doesn't seem to be something that they're worried about. In terms of what we've seen from Byron so far, didn't really get to see a whole lot during the spring. We saw him in the spring game. He wasn't great, but obviously you don't want to put too much stock into one scrimmage. Got to actually see a little bit of 11-on-11 work today, and Byron looked good. The offense was flowing well. He had a nice deep touchdown pass to Jeremiah Coger where the defensive back slipped, but he ran the offense well. And we haven't really got to see what he can do with his legs yet in this Auburn offense, but that was obviously one of his biggest strengths when he was at South Florida.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Do you get the sense that he's going to be running as much as he was at USF because of the physicality, the toll that can take on a quarterback? Do you think Golesh is pretty much going to call the offense the same way he did at South Florida that he will at Auburn for the most part?
I don't expect the scheme or the play calling to be much different. I think they know what works, but I also don't think Byron Brown is going to have to run the ball as much as he did last year, because when you look at who is in Auburn's running back room this season, I think Auburn has so many options at running back that, of course they're going to utilize Byron Brown as a runner because he can hurt defenses that way. But I don't think that they necessarily need to rely on him, for rushing yards this year. You've got Jeremiah Cobb, you've got Bryson Washington coming in from Baylor, you've got Omar Mabson, who's a sophomore who the staff really likes. So you've got plenty of options there that I think they'll utilize Byron Brown, but I don't think that they'll rely on his legs necessarily.
The wide receiver core last year, Peter, was there was a lot of excitement around that Auburn group led by Cam Coleman, who's now at Texas. This year, a lot of new faces. How do they feel about that wide receiver group going into the season? It looks like we might have lost Peter there. So hopefully able to get him back and talk some Auburn. It looks like he was out there at practice today. So nice of him to join us. I think Auburn's a really interesting team this season. I'm a big fan of Golesh. Let's see if we're maybe getting Peter back here. Might have to refresh Peter if you can hear me. Still cutting out a little bit. Can you hear me, Peter, at all? I kind of hear you. Okay, yeah, he's going in and out. But yeah, Golesh, I'm a big fan of. I think he's going to be great at Auburn. Their schedule is really tough this year, one of the toughest in the SEC. Auburn's schedule every year, they get screwed every 2 years because they have to play Georgia and Alabama every single year. And instead of getting one of those teams at home or getting one of those teams on the road, they have to both play them either at home or on the road. And this year, they get both of those teams on the road. They also are at Tennessee and at Ole Miss, which is going to be really tough. They get home games against LSU and Florida as well, and then they have to open up the season against Baylor in Atlanta. So it's a tough schedule for Auburn this season.
Can you?
Uh, a little bit, Peter. You're still cutting in and out a little bit. Okay, yeah, it looks like he logged out. So hopefully he'll log back in and join us here and get some connection. But yeah, they're an interesting team. I didn't end up betting Auburn this season because of the schedule, but they're interesting. Let's see. Looks like we got Peter. Peter, looks like we got you back now. Can you hear me? All good?
Yes,
Perfect.
I can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah, so the wide receiver core, what do you expect them to look like this year?
Yeah, I think similar to Byron Brown, there's a lot of confidence in that group. The majority of that core comes from USF. It's a core that was very productive last year. I think the leader in that group right now is Chaz Nimrod. He's someone that the coaching staff has, mentioned on the record as somebody who's kind of stood out already. As a guy who had SEC experience, started his career at Tennessee, where, he didn't put up huge numbers, but was solid. Was a really good player at USF last season, exposed play threat. I think his numbers would have been a lot better. Season for injury.
All right, looks like we lost Peter again, unfortunately, which is a shame. We had him right as he hopped back on. Peter, it looks like maybe we got you back again. I'm not sure. We lost you there for a little bit. Maybe do one more refresh if you can hear me. See if that works. Love to get his thoughts on the defense too, because DJ Durkin is back this year as defensive coordinator for Auburn. That's always one of the interesting things is when you have a coach depart, does the new coach retain any of the staff that was there? And Alex Golish decided to keep DJ Durkin as his defensive coordinator, which I think is a good move because Durkin was really good for Hugh Freeze. Those Auburn defenses were great. It was just the offenses that weren't consistent enough that couldn't score. So Durkin comes back, and I think that was a good move there for Alex Golish, and they're hoping he can be pretty good. Peter, let's see if we got you one more time. I think we're good now. You can hear me. Okay, still cutting in and out. I appreciate Peter trying to join us as he's there out at camp. Let's see. Auburn's win total this season. By the way, we're going to have Evan Veith join us coming up next to talk Texas. Pat Dooley still to come to talk Florida. Ryan Shumpert, Tennessee. Cody Goodwin, Missouri. Hunt Palmer to talk LSU. And Harrison Reno to talk Georgia. Peter, looks like I got you back now, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. So talk to me about the defense with DJ Durkin coming back. How have they looked so far? What are your expectations for them?
Yeah, I think the continuity there helps. It obviously helps returning a defensive coordinator. And they've got some, really important players back. I think Xavier Atkins is where it starts, an All-American linebacker in the middle of that defense, just a great athlete, a great playmaker. Then Elijah Melendez next to him, I think, is kind of be the X factor.
Oh, the connection out on the plains today, just not being kind with us. I appreciate Peter trying to join, but just not looking like it's gonna work as he's still cutting in and out. But Peter does great work covering Auburn. It's a shame that the connection just isn't working, so he can't hear all his answers. But make sure you guys give him a follow on X at Peter_Retarkus. Auburn beat writer for AL.com does great stuff there. So we're gonna cut off Peter because unfortunately he just keeps cutting in and out. So appreciate Peter willing to join again. Evan Veith should be joining us here in a second to talk some Texas. He's a reporter for Inside Texas. Excited to see what he has to say about the Longhorns. But again, Auburn this season, if you are a believer in Alex Golish and company, their win total right now, I'm looking at BetMGM, 6.5 for the Tigers is the win total, and the over is -120. And as I was mentioning, their schedule at Tennessee, at Georgia, at Ole Miss, at Bama, and then they also have Florida, LSU at home. and they get Baylor on the road, or they get Baylor week 1 neutral site in Atlanta. So that's going to be it's going to be a critical game for Auburn and their win total for them maybe making a bowl this season. I think if Alex Golesh can make a bowl in week 1 for Auburn, that would be a huge accomplishment dealing with that schedule. I mean, getting Georgia, Ole Miss, and Bama on the road is nasty. Tennessee's a tough place to play as well. But I think this is one of the better young coaches in college football. I think Auburn's got a good one. If you're an Auburn fan, I'd be patient with Golesh because, again, the schedule's tough. The conference is tough. He's got to put his blueprint on the program. He's got to get his recruiting in there. But I've always been a big fan of Byron Brown. And when his teams were at USF, go look at how they fared against SEC teams. They beat Florida last season. They played Alabama really tough in 2 consecutive years. So his USF team showed the ability to play against SEC teams on the road in Tuscaloosa, in the swamp. And we'll see if they can do that again this year, week to week on the plains in Auburn. But it's going to be an interesting first year for Alex Golesh. If I had to take anything, though, it'd probably be the over because I am a big fan, even though that schedule is really tough. Defensively, they do lose 6 of their top 8 tacklers from last season, but they still should be pretty solid. And as I mentioned, they do bring DJ Durkin back, so they should be pretty good on that side of the ball as well. Waiting for Evan Veith to join us here to talk some Texas. He's a reporter for Inside Texas, and obviously want to get his thoughts on the Longhorns, who I'm coming around to more and more as the season starts to get closer. I think the Longhorns are super fascinating this year because, last year they were the preseason number 1. There was all this hype for how they would look, and there was all this hype for Arch, and we didn't know what to expect. They open up the season against Ohio State. They lose that game. And I think we underestimated, even though we all viewed that Texas-Ohio State game as whoever won was the clear best team in the country. They already punched their ticket to the college football playoff. We kind of underestimated how there would be such little margin for error for that team that ended up losing that game. And that's what happened for Texas. By losing that Ohio State game, they could really only afford to lose one more SEC game the rest of the way. They dropped that game at Florida, and then they dropped the Georgia game. They're 9-3, and they're out of the college football playoff. So it's going to be interesting for Texas this season. Once again, that Ohio State game looms large for Texas in the non-conference. If they don't win that game again, there's a chance that the Longhorns could maybe be on the outside looking in of the college football playoff yet again. They do have also road trips to Tennessee this year. They're at Missouri, at LSU, and at Texas A&M. It's going to be a tough schedule for Texas. Florida's at home, Mississippi's at home, Arkansas, Mississippi State. So the home schedule, they should run the table. Outside of the Ohio State game, they should beat everybody at home. That's why that Ohio State game is so crucial, because if they win that, they can afford to lose 2 of those 4 games between at Tennessee, at LSU, at A&M, and then the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma. But if you lose that Ohio State game, then all of a sudden you can only lose one of those games. And if you're Sark, man, if you're Texas, like, if not now, I mean, when? Like, this has to be the year. You've got the quarterback. A lot of people feel like the offensive line for me was a big question going into last year. They had 4 new guys up front. And again, that Ohio State game early on in the year exposed some weaknesses. Arch was hurt. He got rolling at the end of the season. But when they suffered those early losses to Florida and Ohio State, that's what really cost them their season and making the college football playoff. But I think this year with an experienced O-line, Arch healthy going into the year, and then this wide receiver room, I mean, outside of Ohio State, might be the best in the business with Ryan Wingo and Cam Coleman. They're going to be really, really solid. So I think Texas is definitely going to be a team that's going to be really, really good at receiver. Defensively, Colin Simmons is all American, everything. He's an absolute stud. My question for Texas, though, is they have had one of the best defensive coordinators in college football the last few years in Andy Kwiatkowski. He's gone, and now Will Muschamp is back. And Will Muschamp has had some success in college football as a defensive coordinator. He's done some good things. I don't know how much I love Will Muschamp as a defensive coordinator in 2026. He's got a ton of talent. And again, Sark did a great job identifying Kwiatkowski, and that was a great relationship. Him and Muschamp have worked together in the past, but I don't know if that is going to be as great as maybe people think. But at the end of the day, Texas, their ceiling, they're going to be as good as what Arch ends up being. He's once again one of the betting favorites to win the Heisman Trophy. And people are now thinking that he's going to be this year what he's supposed to be last year. And if that ends up being true, then yeah, Texas is going to be really, really good. But if he disappoints, Texas is going to disappoint. But I don't know if there's a team with bigger pressure on them this season than there is with Texas in that week 2 game against Ohio State. It's a must win. They have to win that game. If they don't, I think they're missing the college football playoff yet again. So right now they're minus money to make the college football playoff. They're like minus 180, minus 200 at most spots. If you think that Texas is going to lose that game to Ohio State, I think it's worth some money, maybe betting them to miss the college football playoff. Because if they lose to Ohio State, I don't think that they're only going to lose one more game the rest of the season. The schedule is just too tough. I think they're probably going to lose 2 games this year. So that's why they got to win that Ohio State game. It's a big year for Sark. I don't think Sark's on the hot seat or anything like that. I know it'd be a huge disappointment if you don't get to the playoff again this year with Arch Manning. That's a big disappointment. But again, you got to remember how tough it was for Texas before he got there with Charlie Strong and some of those coaches that they were going for. They've only also won one national title in the last 50 plus years. It was with Mac Brown and Vince Young. So Texas is a huge brand. They got a ton of NIL money. They're a big force in the sport, and the sport of college football is great when Texas is good. But, it's not like they've been Alabama here in the last 30 years, or it's not like they've been Ohio State or Georgia or, even Clemson with their recent success. So I think Sark's still good, but it would definitely be a disappointment for sure if his team does not make it to the college football playoff this season. Man, they should be loaded on offense. And if Arch is going to be as good as everybody thinks he's going to be going into this season, there's no excuse for him to take care of business. I guess it doesn't look like Evan Veith is going to join us, unfortunately. So we're waiting here for Pat Dooley, who's going to join us next to talk some Florida Gators. And hopefully he can. Gators are an interesting team this season. They also have a first-year head coach coming in John Summerall. He's won the offseason so far. Have you been watching SEC media days or anything like that? Summerall's had some great quotes. You can see why he was a winner at Troy, why he was a winner at Tulane, and maybe he's the next big, hot coach in the coaching cycle. Because that's the interesting thing, right? It's all these programs that might be looking for new coaches in the next couple of years. You have no idea what the coaching landscape is going to look in that time. And you don't know if people are going to view Summerall as the next big thing. They certainly can, but as usually is the case with Florida, their schedule is, it's very tough this season. And they don't really have a proven guy at quarterback this year either. So it's going to be tough for the Gators too. 8 or 9 wins would be an unbelievable job for John Summerall if he was able to do that with the Gators in year 1. So we will see how it ends up working out. But they're at Auburn, at Missouri, The Georgia game this year is in Atlanta instead of Jacksonville, where it's pretty much always been played. They're at Florida State, at Kentucky. They get Vandy at home, Oklahoma at home, Ole Miss at home. And they also have a road trip to take on Texas as well. So tough schedule. I mean, you're getting Texas and Georgia and Ole Miss and Oklahoma. Those 4 games are going to be tricky. They do get Florida Atlantic and Campbell to open up the season. So John Summerall should be 2-0 when he starts his Florida career. And then the road trip at Auburn is really where things are going to start. So we'll see how it ends up going. But hoping Pat Dooley joins me here in a second. Again, if you're just tuning in, we still have 5 more guests to go here on the show. Pat Dooley going to join us to talk Florida here in a bit. Ryan Shumpert will join to talk Tennessee. Cody Goodwin will join us to talk Missouri. Hunt Palmer for LSU and Harrison Reno will join us to talk Georgia here at the end. Appreciate all you guys tuning in. Again, we're going to preview the Big Ten next week as just previewing all the Power 4 teams in college football with all these people that know these teams, cover them for a living, know them a lot better than you and I do, and hopefully just trying to gain some information to win some bets or whatever it may be, learn some more about the teams and all those sorts of things. So let me text Pat to tell him he's good to hop in the chat. So hopefully we get him on the show. Again, if you're joining us too, let's see. Ryan Horvat is out today. He was a late scratch. He is sick. So I am just riding solo here on Game Day Garage Campus Blitz. But love to get Pat's thoughts on the Florida Gators for the upcoming season. If you're watching the stream, you got any, questions about these teams, or you got any questions that you want me to ask the guest about, please join, as it looks like we have Pat now joining us. Hey, Pat, how's it going?
It's going good. Going good.
Appreciate you joining. Pat Dooley. Check out another Dooley Noted podcast on Mondays and Thursdays, wherever you get your podcasts, and give Pat a follow on X at Pat_Dooley. Before you were hopping on, I was talking about John Summerall, and it certainly feels like he's won the offseason from an interviewing standpoint. Have Gator fans, how excited are they about their new coach down there in Gainesville?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there is a little bit. I mean, this is a fan base that is very much scarred, whether it's Will Muschamp losing to Georgia Southern or, Jim McElwain's shark attacks and, Mullen, who everybody thought they had discovered a guy who was going to go to New Year's Six Bowls and maybe win the SEC and could beat Georgia. And then his final year was just an absolute disaster. And then 4 years of Billy Napier, which obviously did not go well at all. So I think people are hoping and they believe that this guy might be the guy, but they also know that this is still a 4-8 roster, It's still a roster that was kind of gave up last year and didn't play hard until the last game because they were playing a bad team. So I think there is cautious optimism, which I think is a word people use a lot, but that's true.
What would you say, Pat, is the biggest question mark about this roster that you have going into the season?
Well, mine's still going to stay the offensive line. I know that everybody is saying offensive line and back end of the secondary. I think the back end of the secondary is actually going to be okay. I think they're going to get better coaching, and I think that they're I think they've got, in Bryce Thornton, they've got a senior leader, and that's going to help them a lot. They brought in some guys that are going to help them. I think they're going to be fine if they can get a pass rush, which I think they'll be able to do, obviously with Jaden Woods. But that offensive line, I know that John likes to talk about how much they are bench pressing now that they couldn't bench press before. And that's good. It's great. But, when he starts talking about they're going to build a line that's a little more athletic and leaner and everything, I go, well, that's exactly what Dan Mullen did. And it actually worked for 3 years. Well, a leaner, quicker guys that could move around offensive line. But I still have to see it to believe it. Last year they had a guy who's it looks like he's going to make an NFL roster in Austin Barber, and they had Jake Slaughter, who was an All-American, and they weren't good on the offensive line. So I got to see what these guys can do. I will say that they needed to get leaner in many ways. And one way was you'd see these guys with these big guts hanging out, and you go, well, I guess, you're allowed to eat 8 quarter pounders before the game. That's fine. Guys ordering DoorDash and like at midnight before a game. So that's what it looked like. And they look like that on the field.
Yeah, the O-line's definitely a big question. I know the secondary is too for the Gators coming into the season. Have you kind of seen any guys emerge in camp? Are there any guys that they're high on this season? Or do you think the secondary definitely, along with the offensive line, another big question for Florida?
Well, it's an issue, but I think they've got players that can do things back there and be okay. Cormani McClain is a guy that is really a big. I got to wait and see what he does. I mean, he had a pick last year. It was, but he was okay last year, but he wasn't great. One thing I do like about the new coordinator and Brad White is that he is kind of said to these guys, "You make a great play. That's fine. You don't have to celebrate like it's the end of the series. Get back, get ready for the next play, because the next play can get burned." And I've said it's not just Florida, but a lot of teams do this. But certainly for Florida, you're 4-8. You shouldn't be celebrating anything. So that's something that they've got to get way better at. And again, that goes back to what I'm talking about. The one reason that they are 14-26 in the last 4 years in the SEC is because they gave up too many explosive plays. And he said, Brad White said, we've got to lead the league and not giving up explosive plays instead of the other way around.
Who do you think is going to be the quarterback? If they had a game tomorrow, if week 1 was starting tomorrow, who do you think would be under center for the Gators?
Well, I think it'd be Aaron Philo, but it doesn't mean he'll be the quarterback for the Auburn game. And that's the game that is going to, I think, define the beginning of this season and maybe define the whole season. If they can go to Auburn and win, that'll be one thing. If they go to Auburn and lose, I think now everybody goes, maybe it's not going to go so great. Again, that's putting way too much on one game early in the season, but it's an important game. And I think it's important for both teams. I think the winner of that game, assuming Auburn handles Baylor, in the battle of quarterbacks who played against each other last year, but for other teams, which is so weird. But I don't think there's any question if Auburn handles Baylor that the winner of that game is going to be ranked. So it's an important game. But I think I think they're going to play them both early in the season, especially. You got Florida Atlantic. I think Philo is the starter. And then if they get to a situation where they feel comfortable putting Tramel Jones in, I think he goes in. And then the next game is against Campbell, the Fighting Campbells. And if, they should be playing Aiden Warner in that game and they could win. So, but that Auburn game is going to be crucial. And whoever starts that game, you're going to feel like, but they made it very clear. Start the season doesn't mean you're the quarterback the whole season.
Yeah, they get that Auburn game in week 3. And then you know what, Pat? They get Ole Miss the following week, who'll be coming off the LSU game with Kiffin and all that emotion there. So, with that game being at home, who knows? Maybe they can turn that into a little 4-0 start heading in to the Missouri game. Sticking with the offense, I really like the hire, getting Buster Faulkner as the OC. Did a great job at Georgia Tech. Would you expect a heavy dose of running this year? Certainly with Jaden Ball, who's one of the best backs in the SEC. But whether it's Philo or Jones, do you think we see the Gators really use the ground game this year?
Yeah, I mean, they'd be stupid not to. And they were stupid not to last year, but they didn't use it enough. And then all of a sudden in the last game, they just say, hey, let's just give the ball to Jaden Ball and see what happens. And he goes for like 200 yards against FSU. So, they want to use him in multiple ways. He's a pretty good pass catcher too. Getting him the ball out of the backfield and space and putting him in position. He's going to be a workhorse on this team. I asked specifically to Buster Faulkner at the first media day of the year last week. I said, is there a fine line between using Jaden Ball too much and not using him enough? And certainly we've seen that. Now, there's been a history at Florida where they try to play 3 guys and they've got one that's elite. Damian Pierce fell into that category too. But I don't think they're just going to be exclusively run. They're going to throw a lot of swing passes. They're going to try to get him in other ways. But you can't just say we're going to pound the ball when you got Vernell Brown III and Dallas Wilson, who looks like he's healthy with his new cleats, and Eric Singleton, who everybody's raving about in camp from Auburn. And plus you got Micah Mays from Wake Forest. You got a lot of good receivers. So what are you going to do? You got to get them the ball too. There's only one ball. And that's the thing that I am really curious to see how Buster Faulkner works that out, because I don't really have an answer for that. I'm looking forward to seeing how they can figure out how to get the ball to all their weapons. And that's going to be the key for whoever plays quarterback, distributing, the Chris Leak way, as I like to call it. Yep. Or even the Torian Green way when he was a point guard on those national champions. Get the ball to the people that can score.
Pat, before I let you go in about a minute, Vegas win total is about 7 for Florida. They're pretty much seeing like a 7-5 year, which I think feels about right. Is that kind of how you see it? Like Florida, they'll make a bowl game, 6 or 7 wins this year, or, if all goes right, I mean, do you think there's a world where maybe they win like 9 games this year?
Oh, I think there's a world where they can win 9 games. I'm not sure I'm living in it, but I think they could win 10 if he's that good a coach. I mean, we're about to find out if it translates to being a head coach at this level. And we know how tough their schedule is. It's not as tough as it was last year, though. Not as tough as the year before, but it's still really hard. Not very many people in the SEC get easy schedules. So, I think 7-4 is about right, or 7-5 is about right. I picked them to go 8-4, and I maybe was sleeping a little on Oklahoma at home, so I've kind of gone back to 7-5. Mm-hmm. But again, I can't wait to see what is going to happen. I just have no idea right now whether this is going to work or not.
Year 1 for John Summerall in Gainesville. Going to be a fascinating one to watch. Pat Dooley, check him out on another Dooley Noted podcast, Mondays and Thursdays, wherever you get your podcasts, and give him a follow on X at Pat_Dooley. Pat, appreciate the time, man. Have a great season. Hope to catch up with you again soon.
Yeah, anytime, guy. It was fun.
Yeah. All right. Great stuff. Pat Dooley, a lot of fun talking Gators. From the Gators to the Vols. Let's check in now with Ryan Shumpert, who joins me to talk some Tennessee, covers the Vols for Rocky Top Insider. Give Ryan a follow on X at Ryan Shumpert00. Ryan, appreciate you joining me, man. How's everything going?
Oh, everything's going well. Appreciate you having me on. Glad we got a time worked out to talk a little ball.
Yes, sir. So you were telling me that you were just coming, were you on like a Zoom call with some of the coaches, or were you just out of practice?
Yeah, well, we say out of practice. There were 2 periods that practice opened in the media today, and all of about 7 minutes. So we got to watch a very, very minimal amount of practice, and then defensive line coach Rodney Gardner and outside linebackers coach Andrew Jackson met with the media after that. So was over there on campus today, a couple pressers and a little bit of practice to watch.
Who do you think is going to be the quarterback for Tennessee? If they had a game tomorrow, is it going to be Faison or maybe somebody else?
Yeah, I would lean Faison, but I think it's pretty close right now. And the 2 scrimmages they have, first one being this Saturday, the second one being the following Saturday, that's what I think is going to decide this thing. I do think if all's equal in those 2 scrimmages from the quarterbacks, they'll go with Faison Brandon, because I think he has the highest ceiling, or the higher ceiling long-term compared to George McIntyre. But if George McIntyre goes out there and performs better in those 2 scrimmages, I think he'll be the guy when the Vols take the field against Furman.
Do you think Tennessee feels like if their quarterback produces this year, like they're good enough to make the playoff once again?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I don't think it's just a for sure yes in my eyes, because I think there's the good news. Obviously, quarterback's a big question. They got a lot around the quarterback. They got 4 starting offensive linemen back. They got 2 receivers who had over 800 yards last year. Deshaun Bishop rushed for 1,000 yards last year. They got a ton of talent around whoever that quarterback's going to be. So does that, that obviously there's still ranges of the offense could be really, really good if one of the quarterback comes in and performs really well right away, or they could just be pretty good if the quarterback, has a lot of underclassmen mistakes, first-time starter mistakes. I think if the quarterback comes in and is really good and they get enough from the pass rush, I think they're good enough to make the playoffs. But I almost sit here and think the pass rush is probably not a bigger question because, quarterback's just such an important position. But I have more confidence in Tennessee getting quarterback right and being pretty solid there than I do about their pass rush at this point.
Give me what you think the position group of strength for Tennessee is on offense and defense going into the season.
Yeah, well, on defense, I think it's the inside linebacker spot, and it's being tested. Aaron Carter's got his 2-game suspension from the NCAA that will sideline him against really Georgia Tech being the big game week 2. And then Jaden Harmon, who was a talented freshman last year and looked to be a potentially depth piece that pushed for playing time this year. He tore his ACL in Saturday's practice. So they've been tested there early, but I think they're still in a really good spot. They have obviously Carter. They have Jeremiah Thielander, who's played a ton of football. They got Amari Campbell from Penn State, who had over 100 tackles last year, who they really got when they didn't think Carter was going to come back during that stretch when Carter had declared for the NFL draft. And then they have Edwin Spillman, who I think might be the most talented guy in that room. He really came on the back half of his sophomore season. And then Jaden Perlotti, too, a freshman who was kind of situational last year but flashed at times. So they have a ton of depth there. I think they'll be really good. I think offense, it's, there's probably debate whether it be offensive line or receiver. I'd probably lean receiver. I do think Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley, who both had just awesome sophomore years a year ago, it's going to be harder on them because Chris Brassel drew so much attention from opposing defenses. I mean, he was almost, bracketed with a safety after the first month of the season, and that opened up a lot of stuff for those two guys. But I think those two guys are plenty talented enough to go out there and have big seasons. And then one of the more, to me, intriguing position battles on this team right now is for that third receiver spot. Rodarius Jackson, Travis Smith, 2 true sophomores who were 4-star recruits, and then TK Keys, who was number 1, number 2 receiver in the 2026 recruiting cycle, being another guy in that competition. So I think they have depth, and I think they have 2 guys that have already gone out there and proven that they're really good SEC players. And, it wouldn't surprise me if either of them, has a first-team All-SEC type season.
Ryan, underrated coaching move this offseason, I think, was Heupel bringing in Jim Knowles as defensive coordinator. I thought that was really good. I was in on Penn State last year, and a big part of that was when Franklin was able to get Knowles from Ohio State, bring him to be his defensive coordinator. Didn't quite work out the way they envisioned, but now he's in Knoxville. So what have been the early thoughts on Knowles? Because, again, his track record, I mean, he's one of the best DCs in college football.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a lot of excitement about it. It was a bold move. Josh Heupel, in 4 years as Tennessee's head coach, had not fired a single assistant coach. And not only does he fire defense coordinator Tim Banks, he kind of cleans house defensively. Willie Martinez, the cornerbacks coach, was let go. Dallas side linebacker coach Lavorne Harbin was let go. So there's a little bit of retention there, and I think that's the big thing. If you go through the years of Jim Knowles, his first year at a school is typically his worst defense, and it's a complicated system that it takes time for guys to get down. I think Tennessee's banking on 2 things. He brought 2 assistant coaches with him who have coached for him before and know his system really, really well. And then they brought a player at each level of defense. Xavier Gillum's going to start defensive tackle. He's from Penn State. Amari Campbell, I think, will start at linebacker spot. He's from Penn State. And then back in DeJuan Lane, I don't know if he'll start, but he'll play a lot of snaps at safety, either be their second or third safety. So that's kind of the big question. How quickly can this new group get Jim Knowles' defense down? And they're banking that even though it is a new defense coordinator, having position coaches that are familiar with him and a handful of players who are familiar with his defense will mitigate some of those concerns.
Ryan, I'll leave you with just kind of your impressions on Tennessee's schedule this year. Maybe if you have a prediction of what their record is going to be, because I think their schedule is one of the most interesting ones in the SEC, where on paper you see some of the names of the teams that they play, right? The Texases, the Alabamas, the LSUs, but they get all those teams at home. The Georgia Tech game in week 2 is going to be interesting on the road. You also got a road trip to College Station, and then you end the season in Nashville against Vandy. But if they take care of business at home, and when Tennessee's good, I mean, Neyland's as tough a place as there is to play. Like, what would be your prediction for Tennessee this year?
Yeah, it's a really interesting dichotomy where they play a number of what would project to be the best teams in the SEC, but also some teams kind of down at the bottom. Not a lot of teams like in the middle. So yeah, I think I would probably lean 8-4, maybe 7-5 right now. I think it's 8-4 if they can beat both Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt on the road. Neither of those games are going to be easy. I think Tennessee will probably be 4.5 to 7.5 point favorites in those games if they were to be played tomorrow. If they can win those, I think that they'll go 8-4. I think they'll drop that A&M game on the road. I think they'll probably go 1-2 in those 3 big home games of Alabama, LSU, and Texas. I think that Texas one's going to be particularly tough. And then the South Carolina game, that's the game. It's in a really bad spot for Tennessee. It's the week after Tennessee plays Alabama. It's Tennessee's last game before their lone bye week of the year, which is, I think it's the second to last week in October, the 24th, I want to say. And in South Carolina will be coming off a bye game themselves. So that's kind of where I lean at this point. But to your point, if they can get back to, from 2022 to 2024, they lost 1 game at Neyland Stadium. If they can get back to that kind of level, that's the path to making the playoff and having a season maybe better than some are expecting.
Ryan Shumpert covers the Vols for Rocky Top Insider. Give him a follow on X at Ryan Shumpert 00. Ryan, great stuff, man. Good meeting you. Have a great season, and hope to catch up with you somewhere down the road.
Sounds great, PJ. Appreciate having me on.
Yes, sir. Good stuff from Ryan. All right, let's talk some Missouri now as we welcome on Cody Goodwin. He covers Mizzou for Power Mizzou, part of 24/7 Sports. Give Cody a follow on X at Cody Goodwin. Cody, appreciate the time, man. I know you just came from practice, correct? You were watching that today?
Actually, I goofed up on that schedule when we were talking earlier this week. So I'm going to practice after we get done talking. So everything I say right now may not even matter here in about an hour.
Very good. All right. Well, let's preview Missouri and try and break this team down because, as usual, I think Drinkwitz has a good team. They're kind of flying under the radar. I love getting Austin Simmons for Ole Miss because he was the starter going into the Rebels last year, gets hurt, Chambliss takes over. The rest is history. What have been the early impressions of him so far out in camp, and do they feel like they got themselves a pretty good quarterback?
Yeah, they're excited about Austin in the building. They love the arm talent. They love the ability to stretch the field, which is what the offense is really focused on, or at least something that they've been trying to implement this year. And it's not really just Simmons, right? Like, obviously, he's a key part of this. He needs to go out and perform on Saturdays. But in addition to Simmons, they also brought in Chip Lindsey, new offensive coordinator, because Kirby Moore left to go take the head job at Washington State. And then a new quarterbacks coach as well, Garrett Riley, came over from Clemson. So obviously things happened there. Mizzou was able to luck in there. He has a previous relationship with Coach Drinkwitz. So, it's not just Simmons. It's the quarterback brain trust that Drinkwitz surrounded Simmons with. And the goal here, because I think the last few years quarterback play has really kind of held Mizzou back, and especially last year, right? They had a top 10 defense. They had an All-American running back, but they didn't really hit on the quarterback position with Bo Prabula. In some of those bigger games, he just did not come through in the way that they needed him to in order to truly compete for the SEC college football playoff contention. And so the hope here is that they can, redo the defense a little bit. And I'm sure we'll talk about that. You can get Hardy back fully healthy sometime during the season, pair him with Jamal Roberts. The run game is still set in stone. And so if Austin Simmons can give them plus level quarterback play, I think that changes the ceiling and adds a new dynamic to this Missouri offense.
Yeah, I definitely want to get your thoughts on that defense, but I do want to talk about the running back room because a lot of people feel like when healthy, this might be the best running back room in the SEC, maybe in all of college football because of Ahmad Hardy. For people that don't know, he suffered a gunshot wound, but he should have a clear recovery or full recovery. And Cody, is there any maybe timeline on when we should expect to see him? They talked about when he's hoping to make a return by to come back to the season.
No, they haven't set an official date. I know at SEC Media Days in Tampa, and this would have been a few weeks ago now, Drinkwitz outlined a 5 to 8 week recovery program, and he was kind of vague, probably on purpose about that. We don't know what 5 to 8 weeks really meant, right? Like, we know he was medically cleared from the gunshot wound, and so now it's more probably trying to get him back into football shape, right? And so we haven't seen him at practice. Drinkwitz said before they started fall camp that he would not be there the first week of practice, and so now we're into the second second week. We haven't seen him the first couple of practices that we were able to watch earlier this week. So our eyes are peeled. We're looking for 29 when we're out there watching practice and drills and stuff like that. So, we'll see. We also get to talk to Drinkwitz later this week. And so maybe he'll give us an update then. But the expectations that he's going to play, we just don't know an exact date on like when he'll actually suit up and go.
Yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later. What a beast Ahmad Hardy is. Defensively. So they were one of the best defenses in the SEC last year. They returned a ton of production this year. It is a complete overhaul, Cody. So what would you say going into the year is still the position group that's maybe the biggest question mark for Missouri? And then also who could be some players to watch on that defense this year?
Oh man. A lot of question marks at a lot of different positions, right? Because they're the thing that we had been talking about all off season is after the portal kind of came and went, and obviously Missouri they lost some guys, but they also brought some guys in. All 11 regular starters from last year's defense gone. Via the transfer portal, via the NFL, via expired, eligibility. Like it's a lot of production and experience to replace. Now, that doesn't mean the cupboard is totally empty. And actually, a week before fall camp started, Mizzou actually, thanks to a judge in St. Louis County, was able to get back Sterling Webb, who started 8 games for them in the defensive interior. So having him back is big. It makes a defensive line room, I think, better at the top and deeper overall. So they're kind of easing him back in. So it's not like they just slotted him in with the first team defense right away. So they're kind of making him earn it since he wasn't really there for spring or summer workouts. So they have him back. They've got other guys in the room that they've leaned on from a leadership perspective, right? Santana Banner's a very talented safety. He played a lot last year in a reserve role. Nicholas Rodriguez, I think, can be a star at linebacker. And that's a position group in total that Missouri is very, very excited about. They have a lot of guys that they think can play pretty high level snaps at that position group. There are names to know on the defensive line, like Marquise Gracial. We mentioned Sterling Webb. Jason Dowell's another guy in the interior that I know everybody's really excited about. And then on the edges, you have Darius Smith, the guy who was number 3 behind Zion Young and Damon Wilson last season. Now it's his turn to take a step forward and kind of be that primary pass rusher for Mizzou. You've also got Langdon Kitchen, a defensive end on the other side. He's a fun story. He's a D2 transfer from Northwest Missouri State. Was Zion's backup last year. Now, okay, you got your second year in the SEC program. He went through spring, summer, all those workouts in the offseason. Now it's his turn to potentially be the starter. They have a lot of guys that they went and got in the portal and that they have developing through the pipeline. If those guys don't produce in the way that they think they can throw a lot of bodies at those position groups specifically. So there's a lot of guys that they think can play, but when you lose as much experience and as much production as they did from last year's defense, which was top 10 nationally, you're going to have a lot of questions, and there's going to be a little bit of, okay, I need to see this first before I really buy into it. If you want the optimistic view, there's a lot of talent. And then on top of that, defensive coordinator Corey Batoon, the 2 years he's been at Missouri, top 30 defense nationally both years. They have steadily improved. They have a system that they know works. And so now it's just a matter of finding guys who fit the system, plugging them, helping them learn the playbook, and then going out and playing on Saturdays. So there is that aspect to it that I think maybe Missouri deserves the benefit of the doubt, even with all this turnover, but there's still an aspect of it where it's like, man, I got to see this first. I got to see them in action. I got to know that I can trust certain things about this defense before I really buy into it.
What do you think would classify as a good season for Missouri this year? Would it be winning 8 or 9 games? Would it be knocking off one of those top teams in the SEC, especially on the road? Like they can go on the road and beat like a Georgia or an Ole Miss. Would that be massive for Drinkwitz? Like when you kind of look at the season, look at the schedule, what would you maybe classify good season for Mizzou?
Well, I think beating a team with a winning record would be just a thumbs up on the way because, they went 8-5 last year, and all 8 wins, I don't think any of them were above 500. So the 5 good teams that they played last season, they lost those games. And some of them were close. Some of them were fist fights. But, in order to kind of break through the middle of the SEC where it's very crowded and get to that upper tier and contend for playoff spots, you got to win those big games. And so I think Mizzou fans would take winning those big games, if they're able to go between the hedges and knock off a Georgia, if they're able, they host both Texas A&M and Texas. If they could get one of those wins, I think that would be pretty big for the program. They close out against Oklahoma. And, if all things go according to plan, Oklahoma's going to probably be in the playoff hunt. Can Mizzou play spoiler if they're out of it by that point in the season? I think they would take a lot of pride in that. I think success for this Missouri season is, can you play meaningful November football games, right? Because you look at all the turnover, you look at the question mark at quarterback, like there's Austin Simmons. I know he was the starter at Ole Miss last year, but the limited snaps he's played, it's not been overly impressive. Part of that could be he just needs experience. But part of that could be, a number of different reasons. And so now he's in a new offense with new coaches. I think there's still a lot for him to prove. And so I think for this Missouri team, just given all the turnover, given the schedule, right? Like they're playing 4 teams that were in the playoff last year. And that doesn't count Texas, who is widely considered to be, one of the most talented rosters in college football this year. Like that schedule is a bear. And so if you can get to November and play meaningful football games, which is to say, when you put it in context of the playoff race and the SEC race, can you get to November with 1 or 2 losses? Can you set yourself up to, okay, if we run the table in November, we'll give ourselves a chance to really kind of insert ourselves into the SEC conversation, insert ourselves into the college football playoff conversation. I think if you can get to November with the opportunity to make some noise, I think most Mizzou fans will take that. Now, will they make some noise? I don't know. There's a lot that this team has to show me before we get to November. But I think if they give themselves the opportunity to play meaningful November football games, I think that counts as a really good season for this team.
I like that answer a lot. Great stuff as always. Cody Goodwin covers Mizzou for Power Mizzou, part of 24/7 Sports, and give him a follow on X at Cody Goodwin. Cody, always great talking with you, man. Have a great season, and hope to catch up with you again soon.
Appreciate you having me, man. Take care.
Yes, sir. All right, good stuff there from Cody. Now let's check in with Hunt Palmer and talk some LSU. Hunt is the host of the Hunt Palmer Show, 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time, weekdays, 104.5 ESPN. Also pre and post game for LSU Sports Radio Network. You guys can give Hunt a follow on X at Hunter Palmer 88. And Hunt, look, man, you've been covering LSU football for a while. Where does this offseason rank among some of those before with everything that's been happening?
I mean, you could make the argument that the week that Lane Kiffin the week that Brian Kelly was fired and then Scott Woodward subsequently fired was as impactful a week as LSU football, the program's ever seen. And then we hadn't even gotten to the Lane Kiffin stuff that would follow a month later. So, yeah, it's been wild. There have been lawsuits. There's been a lot of transfers in and out, a lot of fights over coaches, and it's been wild. I'm about ready to kick the ball off as opposed to dealing with courtroom stuff and legal documents, but it's created a lot of interest, which in our line of work is a good thing.
Certainly has. Hunt, what is just the number one thing that you're most excited to see when they kick off week 1 against Clemson? Is it just how Leavitt looks? Is it maybe how this new-look defensive line is? Is it just waiting to see Kiffin with that LSU visor on his hat? Like, what is the number one thing that intrigues you most when they kick that game off against Clemson?
I would love it, just love it, if they could hand the football off and get like 6 yards. It would just be incredible. Because I haven't seen that happen in 3 years. Really, it's been a long time since they could run the ball at all. Jaden Daniels made up for everything 3 years ago with running for over 1,000 yards and being Superman. But they just have been atrocious running the ball. And Ole Miss under Kiffin and Charlie Weiss has been very, very good running the ball, and they've been committed to running the ball. LSU's been dead last in the SEC in rushing attempts per game in the last 2 seasons, dead last year in rushing yards per game and yards per carry. Just an anemic running game, and you can't win like that. There are a lot of things that LSU is going to do differently this year than they had done with the previous coaching staff, but running the football is going to be chief among them for me.
What have you seen from Sam Leavitt so far? What have been the early impressions? How has he looked dealing with that Liz Frank injury?
So it goes back to the spring when he was here. The first week he wore tennis shoes and did some handoff stuff and light throwing, and then he got the pins removed from his foot and missed the rest of spring. We saw him out there at practice, but he didn't do anything. He didn't talk to us. We were told in the summer things went well. We were told that he was running 21 miles an hour. He was on Instagram windmill dunking through the practice goalposts in the indoor facility, but we didn't see him. So we've gotten a chance to see a little bit of fall camp. Lane Kiffin has limited our access pretty significantly, and I'm fine with that. I don't think the press has a right to be in there while they're practicing. It's nice if he lets us in, which he did in the spring. We haven't seen a lot. He's running with the first team. He's throwing the ball around. He's jogging between drills, but we're not seeing any 7-on-7, any 11-on-11. So they're telling us he's fine. We've seen some evidence on social media that he's fine, but we won't know how that thing looks and feels until he takes off the first time against Clemson, whether that's evading a pass rush or trying to gain some yardage. It seems like he's doing just fine, but again, we're not seeing a ton at practice.
They call him the Portal King, and he definitely lived up to that with all the moves that he made this offseason. What is the position group you feel about best for LSU going into the season, and then the one that maybe you have the most question marks about?
Best, I would say probably wide receiver, not because they have a first round pick at wide receiver, but because I think they've got 7 guys who can absolutely play at the SEC level, and they'll find the best 4 to go out there with Trey Green, who's the best player on the team, I think, and they'll have a really good core of pass catchers. It's not their most talented position. It's the one with the highest floor. There's not a lot of question marks there other than who's going to be the top 4, but they've got guys all over the place they can go. As far as question marks, I've got a few. I didn't love the fact that we went out there last week at the end of the week, and when they were running a simple 11-on-0 defensive shell drill, just a pursuit drill. There's no offense. It's just to get the blood going when we're out there for 12 minutes. And the 2 starting defensive tackles were true freshmen, Deuce Geralds and Richard Anderson. And while those guys are making waves in camp and were really highly rated recruits and very likely have a huge future at LSU, starting 2 true freshmen, potentially defensive tackle, is a concern to me. Now, they've got older guys. Malik Blockton started some games for Auburn last year. Stephylan Green started for Clemson last year. Dominic McKinley was a 5-star recruit that started games for LSU last year. But those guys have never been, at any of those stops, Auburn, Clemson, LSU, never been super impactful players, and it feels like they're not holding off this ridiculous freshman defensive line class. So there's a little bit of a concern at defensive tackle. And then in terms of the top end at corner, no concerns. DJ Pickett and PJ Woodland are going to make one of the best cornerback tandems in the country. Behind them, I don't know what you got. You got Jakeem Jackson, who has played sparingly for 3 years in college, and then Aiden Anding ruptured his Achilles in spring. So you don't have depth at corner. You've got high-end guys, and if your 2 corners stay healthy, you're just fine. But beyond that, it can get a little dicey.
What are expectations in year one, Hunt? Like, do you feel like it's playoff or bust? Do you think people just want LSU to look like the offense that they envision, what we saw all those years at Ole Miss? Like, what do you think most fans would classify as a successful season for the Tigers?
I don't think LSU is unique in this. I think you could point to 15 teams in the country that feel the same way. Like, if you don't make the playoffs, you're feeling like you're disappointed. You feel like you didn't reach the goals you have. It's hard to make the playoffs. There's no question about that. And especially hard to make it in the first year that you've been on campus, which Lane Kiffin, this is his first year, obviously. But I do think that expectation-wise, you probably need to make the playoffs. Now, the reaction to that, if you lose 2 really tight games, 2 of them on the road, and you end up 9-3 and don't make it, I don't think anybody's going to bring out the pitchforks just yet for this staff in year one. But expectation-wise right now in August, yeah, I think that the expectation would be to make the playoff.
Do you like the fact that he kept Blake Baker on as the defensive coordinator? Do you think that was the right move to do that?
Yeah, I do. I don't think there's many questions about that. Baker took over a team that was 108th in the country in total defense. It was the worst defense in LSU school history during Jaden Daniels' Heisman year of 2023. They were just awful on defense. And he's made them into a top 30 defense. Were they great last year? No. They did not stop Ole Miss nearly enough. They got gashed by Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. They couldn't stop Marcel Reed and Texas A&M in the second half. They had problems last year at times, but they also had some really good games. They were great against Bama, great against Clemson, incredible against Florida, and were good enough against Oklahoma to win that game. They did some really good things last year, but they weren't as consistent. But he's built every year, and if he can build on top of what last year was, and all of a sudden you've got a top 15 defense to go with a Lane Kiffin, Charlie White offense, I think you've got a chance.
Hunt, what is your expectation this year for LSU? Do you think they get to the college football playoff? The schedule's tough, but a lot of their tough opponents are at home. So what do you envision this year?
Yeah, season ticket holders are getting their money's worth in Baton Rouge this year. Clemson comes to town, A&M comes to town, Alabama comes to town, Texas comes to town. It's a great home schedule. Right now, I don't have them at 10-2. I just don't think they're going to navigate this thing. It's a brutal September with Clemson coming in, then you're at Ole Miss, and then A&M's the next week, and then you've got a stretch at the back end that is Bama, Texas, and Tennessee on the road. That's brutal as well. So I think they're probably a 9-3 team. I can see 8-4, and I can absolutely see 10-2. But I think the easy chalk pick is probably 9-3. And after last year, when everybody was picking LSU to be a dark horse or even a playoff team, and then they beat Clemson, and it was just, well, they're a top 5 team, and the entire bottom fell out. Maybe we're all a little bit guarded down here in Baton Rouge.
What home game are you looking forward to the most between Clemson, A&M, Bama, and Texas? Because those are some good ones. So which one, if you had to power rank them, would be your one?
Probably Texas for a few reasons. Texas was supposed to come here in 2020 after LSU win in 2019, the famous Joe Burrow to Justin Jefferson game. And then, of course, COVID canceled that. But I've been going to that stadium since 1993, and I've never seen that burnt orange come out of that tunnel. I've seen Florida and Bama and Tennessee and Georgia and all those teams come out forever. And, it'll be cool to see Clemson in the opener as well. But to see Texas come out of there, Arch Manning, Steve Sarkisian, maybe they've got 4 top 15 picks on that roster. Like, I'm excited about that one. But for that to be as good as it can be, LSU's got to take care of business early on and make it an important game. If you've already lost 3 or 4 games by then, it takes the luster off. What I know is when LSU and Clemson get ready to kick it off in a couple of weeks, it's going to be absolutely bonkers in there. So that'll be good as well.
Unbelievable. Host of the Hunt Palmer Show, which is coming up in 20 minutes, 1 to 3 p.m. Central, weekdays, 104.5 ESPN. And he also does pre and post for LSU Sports Radio Network. Give him a follow on X at Hunt Palmer 88. This was awesome, Hunt. Appreciate the time, man. I know you got a show to get ready for. So thanks for spending a few minutes with me. Have a great season, and hope to talk to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep, got it. Great stuff, Hunt Palmer. All righty, let's talk some Georgia Bulldogs now, as we welcome on Harrison Reno, who joins us. Give Harrison a follow on X at Harrison Reno. Covers Georgia football for UGAsports.com and hosts of the Top Dog podcast and Peach State Power Hour as well. Harrison, how's everything going, man? How's training camp been going? Or I should say, how's just camping going down there in Athens?
Yeah, man, it's been going good. Just legit got back, cut it a little bit close with post, pressers and all that, but it's going good right now. They're, I guess, first full week of camp right now, starting that right now. They just started, I think it was last Tuesday was their first day of camp. So pads are coming on, I believe officially yesterday the pads are on, and they're ready. They're ready for hopefully what they're hoping will be another college football playoff appearance.
Well, I appreciate you making the time. I know you're coming back there, so appreciate you squeezing me in. Georgia has made 7 straight SEC championship games. I don't know how many people realize that. It's just been unbelievable consistency for Kirby Smart. And I got to tell you, Harrison, I don't know if you feel the same way, but the schedule, at least on paper, feels like it's more favorable than it's been the last few years. So how do Bulldog fans and, people around the program feel about their chances of making it to an 8th straight SEC title game?
Yeah, PJ, and I should have added this in the first part. Appreciate you for having me on, my man. Always
Yes,
a pleasure to do these appearances. In terms of the schedule and Georgia fans, I guess, optimism, I explained it like this last week when asked kind of a similar question. I think fans are confident about their team, especially this Georgia team, from August through December. They trust them to take care of business. I mean, that's essentially what Kirby Smart has done for the last 7 years. It's kind of like with that stat you said about the SEC championship games. Obviously, the back-to-back SEC titles is, again, historic in one way, but at the same time, the standard is high enough now where that doesn't even feel like it's enough. So I think they're really confident. Georgia fans are really confident in terms of what's to come in the regular season. Kirby Smart's shown that he can get his team through a SEC schedule, whether it's tough or relatively easy. This one looks more akin to like some of those early SEC East schedules in terms of not having too difficult of a schedule to wade through, but it is a 9-game schedule, and that's going to be a new experience for them. The biggest thing about this Georgia team, I think, compared to years past, is going to be, can they stay healthy? I mean, we saw what the 8-game slate did to them last year, and you played a 9th-game SEC championship, and you were down 2 starters after that in terms of Drew Bobo and Gabe Harris, and that was the big thing that Kirby echoed kind of post-game in the SEC championship was, look at the injuries both those teams had going into that game. That was a 9th conference game for both those teams. Now we're talking about that conference championship being a 10th game for the 2 teams that make it. Something real interesting to follow and to think about going forward. But as you know, for the rest of the year in terms of January, I think Georgia fans are cautiously optimistic, but definitely are still a little bit concerned in terms of the last 2 showings in the playoff.
The wide receiver room, Harrison, has been a big talking point for Georgia the last few years. They led the nation in drops a couple of years ago. Then they totally revamped it last year, and it was an improvement. But what are the expectations for that group going into this season? Do they feel the best they have about it, over the last couple of years?
That's an interesting question. Kirby Smart was asked something similar at SC Media Days, and he thanked the reporter for asking those questions about the receiver room, so he'd forward it on to them, and they would see it and use it as motivation. So far, the early buzz out of fall camp has been more leaning towards the defense and has kind of caused some panic in terms of what that means for the receiver group. But like I said, it's the first week of camp. They're not even scrimmaging yet. They're just now putting the pads on. I think Georgia as a staff feels confident in the group they have. They made a decision as a staff this offseason to bet on what they have in that room as opposed to going out in the transfer portal and kind of reloading that room like they did a year ago. You saw a Zachariah Branch, Colby Young, a Dylan Bell depart for the NFL, Noah Thomas go off to the NFL, and they decided they only wanted to take one guy. And that was Isaiah Canyon, the guy from Georgia Tech, somebody who they know from playing a couple times at Georgia Tech, but also from the high school days in terms of down there in Warner Robins, someone they were extremely familiar with. I really like Canyon and the makeup of him as a true X receiver, something that Georgia hasn't had body type wise consistently since A.D. Mitchell left. In terms of some of those other receivers, it's really just banking on, I don't think the question is talent, PJ. To me, it seems more of a question of, do they turn into what they should in terms of production? Those guys are all highly rated guys. You look at a Talon Taylor was one of the top ranked receivers in his recruiting class coming out of that year. I mean, Landon Rolden was the same way. Thomas Blackshear, all those guys are highly rated. Now it's just time they have to get out there and show it on the field.
Harrison, I bet Gunnar Stockton to win the Heisman Trophy at 20-1. I know Kirby hasn't had a Heisman winner yet, but I just like the price. I like the makeup. I like the fact that he's a veteran. I look at their games last season, how great he played against Tennessee and Ole Miss in some of those big games. So, with Georgia having a good offensive line, you bring up the receiving core. What are the expectations for Stockton this year? Like, do you think there is a chance he could put himself in the Heisman conversation?
I think there's definitely a chance. And we kind of talk about this a lot throughout the offseason. I think Gunner's biggest jump this year for him in terms of taking the next step, we kind of saw it with Stetson, is you got to raise the floor in terms of as a passer. Because I think we all saw the ceiling is high. You go look at some of those games last year down the stretch, kind of later in the season. I think of the Ole Miss game the first time around, the Texas game in Athens. Like, Gunner played at an extremely high level in those games and was a reason that Georgia won. I mean, in the Ole Miss game, I'd argue he might have been the reason that they won the game. If Gunner doesn't go out there and he's not lights out, they probably lose that game because their defense really struggled to get a stop for 3 quarters. If we could see that at more of a consistent rate in terms of, there's the ceiling there, but the floor. You go look at the Georgia Tech game. You go look at some of the first half of some of these other games. He particularly struggled at times in some of these games, and got to raise the floor a little bit. Can't be so high and low. If he can raise that floor and find like a consistent baseline, I think he could certainly put himself in the Heisman race. Maybe I'm more confident in terms of a top 10 finish. I'm not as confident in a top 4 finish because I think he's going to have to put up some really gaudy numbers. And as you well know, that's really never been the mantra or even something we've seen from Georgia under Kirby Smart.
Yeah, very, very true. Do you feel like this Georgia team is good enough to win the national championship? It feels like a lot of people have the same thought of Georgia, Texas, good enough to win the SEC, but it's probably going to be one of those Big Ten teams, Notre Dame, maybe Miami, that wins it all. Kirby obviously won those couple back-to-back. They haven't won it since. Do you think this could be the team that maybe breaks that stretch? Do you think they're good enough to do it?
I think they have the right pieces in place in the right spots. I mean, we talk about the mold of the national championship teams over the last 3 years. You need an older team. And I know Georgia's one of the 4 youngest teams in college football this year in terms of average age of their football team. But you go look at these 19-year-olds. I believe it's like 19 is the average age, somewhere in there. These are some really experienced 19-year-olds, like 18 to 19-year-olds. These are guys who played in big roles last season. Like I think about Quintavious Johnson going into his second full year as a starter. That guy was a freshman in 2024 and really hadn't played edge much. That guy was a high school quarterback and was brought into Georgia to play edge and play their jack position, which is, he brings a body type that's not commonly found. And he showed some really high upside last year. But you look at some of these other guys, Gabe Harris, who's been on the roster but doesn't have experience. Like their defense as a whole, Chris Cole's another one. They have guys that are young, yes, in age, but have a ton of experience. And I think that's been the one thing about college football the last 3 years is you're seeing the most experienced teams be the ones to be consistent and get through January and make a run. I think Georgia has that. They check that box. The main question here is, can their offense take another level in terms of explosiveness? We really haven't seen them really finding that explosive action, explosive trait as often as they did back in the 2021 and 2022 days. Georgia's been very methodical on offense. They got to put together a little bit more of the ability to score quickly.
Harrison, I'll leave you with this. What is your prediction for the Dogs this season? How many wins do you see in the regular year? Do you think they win the SEC again? How far could you see them going in the playoff? What would be your predictions in this point in time?
I've settled on this. I'm 11-1. I think you lose one of the two games between Ole Miss and Alabama. Right now, me personally, I'm picking them to lose the Alabama game, despite some questions I have about Alabama as a team. That's always just been the bugaboo. And I
never
know
beat them in the regular season. Kirby's
and it's again coming off of a win versus them. You lost to them in the regular season. I expect the Boars going to have a really good game plan in a really tough environment to play in. I think it's going to be close again, but I think Alabama pulls that one out. So at 11-1, they should get back into the SEC championship game. Me personally, I expect them to play Texas in a rematch of 2024. And I was telling somebody this the other day. If that is the matchup in the SEC championship, until Texas beats them, I'm taking Georgia to win. And I know it's not the most in-depth analysis in the world, and it's a little bit lazy, but kind of the same thing with Alabama. I picked Alabama to beat Georgia in the SEC championship with the same reason. I got to see Georgia do it again. So I think Georgia's going to go 11-1. I think they're going to win the SEC. Whether or not they advance out of their first round game, or I guess technically the quarterfinal game in the college football playoff, really going to come down to what that roster looks like after a 9-game schedule. I think they have the pieces in place if they have some things fall their way in terms of the injury bug and have some receivers really step up and play well to make a run in the national championship. But I mean, man, it just seems like this sport has become more and more unpredictable in terms of it's really now kind of like baseball in the basketball tournament in terms of best team may not always win or may not always make it to the championship in college football. It's going to be the one that gets hot at the right time.
No doubt. We know those teams. I mean, Georgia, certainly those teams that get the buys in the college football playoff have not been serving them well. So it'll be an interesting year for the Dogs. I agree. I think 11-1, probably a good look for them in the regular season. Harrison Reno covers Georgia football for UGAsports.com, host of the Top Dog podcast and Peach State Power Hour. Give him a follow on X at Harrison Reno. Harrison, always appreciate the time, man. Great stuff. Have a good season, and hope to catch up with you at some point during the year.
Absolutely. Appreciate you for having me, my man.
Yes, sir. Good stuff from Harrison. All right, let's wrap things up now with the Texas Longhorns as I welcome on Evan Veith, who joins me. Give Evan a follow on X at Evan Veith. He was a reporter for Inside Texas. And Evan, the $1 million question that everybody wants to know. How's Arch Manning looking so far in camp? What are the expectations? Do you think he's going to live up to what everybody's thinking that he can be this season?
Oh, it's a two-part question. I think they kind of contradict themselves a little bit because right now in camp, it's not quite been this 101 dead set Heisman level quarterback. And that's because mostly, honestly, because the backup, KJ Lacey, has been a little bit more accurate than Arch Manning. And that's something that Lacey has to be. He's a shorter quarterback, someone who's not going to be able to kind of withstand hits in the pocket. So that's part of his game. That's something we knew Lacey was good at. But, when you talk about Arch Manning now in year 2 starting, the hopes that you see from training camp is this is just clearly the best player on the field. And he's a quarterback who's just kind of dominating everyone around him. And the Texas defense is really good. Colin Simmons is someone that can just wreck a practice by himself. But there's been misses from Manning. He's had some interceptions in camp, which, it happens both ways. It's a good thing that the defense is generating those. But I wouldn't say he's been this like super electric, can't miss guy in camp so far, which maybe signals some alarm bells for Longhorn fans. I don't think it's going to matter all that much. I still think he's going to be, this high-level quarterback that we saw at the end of last year, and with more experience and also just a way better supporting cast. I do think this is someone that's going to live up to that, top 3 quarterback in the country hype.
This wide receiver room, I know everybody's talking about Ohio State with Jeremiah Smith, but Ryan Wingo coming back and then getting Cam Coleman from Auburn. I've been seeing on Twitter, like some of the catches he's been making over the last few days. how good does Texas feel about the wide receiver room, and then also getting Hollywood Smothers as well to surround Arch Manning with some weapons?
Yeah, just a completely revamped group of skill position players. I mean, 2 running backs in after 2 came out from Wisner Baxter to a much more electric duo of Smothers and Brown, who, they're kind of similar runners. The fact that they're much more home run hitters and get you those explosive plays, but it's different styles of running. Smothers is a little bit more in between the tackles, cutting left and right, whereas Brown brings a lot of that straight line explosiveness, just hitting one hole and gone. And so that's going to be way better, at least speed wise, from Wisner and Baxter, who Baxter really struggled in 2025. And Wisner was good, but kind of the rivalry reaper. He didn't do much else outside of beating up on A&M and Oklahoma, which I know is frustrating for their fan base to see. But outside of that, the wide receiver core just mightily upgraded, right? Wingo and Mosley get to be a year more experienced, but that comes with having a number one who just kind of takes away the attention from them. And Ryan Wingo had a lot of coverage on him down the field. That's why Texas had to generate so much behind the line of scrimmage last year, because he wasn't quite ready to be that true number one and take your downfield targets and be the guy on third down, but also just wasn't a lot of help around him. Parker Livingston was a good receiver for Texas. Now on to Oklahoma, that Red River rival now. But Cam Coleman's just a different specimen, right? A different type of athlete. You saw the catch that went viral this weekend, the one-handed on the tipped pass, which we have learned it was a tip pass. But more than anything, Texas is going to be able to unlock him a lot more than Auburn did. He's obviously going to get those downfield stretching plays where he's going one-on-one and a 50-50 ball turns into a 65-35 ball when Cam Coleman's under it. But more than anything, they're going to use him more in the screen game and as a blocker and in slants, and finding him on digs on the inside. He'll be the number one target on third downs, but Mosley can also do that role as well. Just so much more from this group. It's easily the biggest upgrade, is there's so many more guys that can make plays on the offense.
The defense, I think, is fascinating, Evan, because, you think of Texas and you think of Sark and offense and all this, but Kwiatkowski was awesome as a defensive coordinator. They lose him, and they're bringing in Will Muschamp, who's obviously had a lot of success as a coach, but at this point, year 2026, don't really know how that's going to work out. So what have been the early thoughts on that and how the players have kind of received Muschamp? And then you talk about Colin Simmons. Again, he's All-America, everything. He's one of the best players in college football. Who are some other impact players on that Texas defense we should keep an eye out on?
Yeah, the players clearly love Muschamp. I mean, the energy he brings is very different from Kwiatkowski. And PK was a very good coordinator. Really, I mean, I think that Florida game last year soured a lot of fans' minds. It was a kind of completely backwards game plan for what they were trying to do. I could go very in-depth about that, but that's not what we're talking about. But he was much more of a laid-back, kind of this like chill guy, a scheme guru, someone who knew what he was talking about. You had to respect what he had to say, but it wasn't someone that was going to lay into the defense or be the loudest guy in the field. It's the exact opposite with Will Muschamp. I mean, Coach Boom, you hear it when you're at the practice. And thankfully, he's a defensive back guy. And when we're there on the field for Texas practice, we're right in front of the DBs as opposed to the D-line over on the side. And you can just hear the amount of hands-on coaching he does. And, it comes with a number of curse words that I can't repeat on here. But it really is – it's a different energy that he brings. And I think the defense feels that. Texas needed more physicality from the team as a whole going into 2026. They needed kind of a head coach of the defense, as Steve Sarkisian has put it, so he can be more focused on being that true offensive coordinator for the Longhorns. Muschamp brings that, and I think it's going to work really well for him, even though, it's fair to criticize that he hasn't been a true play caller in about a decade, but it wasn't like he was twiddling his thumbs for Georgia, which Harrison was just talking about before. Harrison's a great guy. And defensively, Simmons is the big name. Rasheem Biles might be an All-American this year at linebacker. He was their kind of priority defensive addition with Coleman on offense. Linebacker from Pitt, he had about 15 tackles for loss last year, some of the most athletic pick sixes you'll see from a linebacker. Superb tackler, really good in coverage. Blitzes a lot. They'll use that for him. He's going to maybe be second in sacks on this team. And just this D-line in general is super impressive. And I like some of the guys in the secondary. Jelani McDonald should be an all-SEC player. Some good cornerbacks. Bo Masco, a veteran from Rutgers. But Lance Jackson in year 2, Justice Terry in year 2 are really set for breakouts. Hiru Kanu was the 3rd or 4th best returning D-line in the SEC this year, and he's coming with, I think, year 5 now for him, and he's a really good player. Alex January, probably the most underrated guy. There's a lot of names in the front seven that will matter and a lot more experience. I think they're the only team, I remember making the stat, only team with 4 300-plus snap interior defensive guys coming back, and the only team with 4 200-plus snap edge guys coming back. So one of the few teams in the SEC that actually returns a lot of their D-line talent.
Do people around Austin and around the Texas program feel like if Sark can't win the title this year, he might never do it? Like, just with the perfect storm, the talent, Arch another year, like, is this his best shot, you think, maybe, to win it all?
I'm not someone who subscribes to that idea because it's a sport that has a lot of randomness to it. And I think that for me personally, the Final Four has to be this team's floor, really. Like, if that doesn't happen, then there's going to be a lot of hard conversations. I do think there's a vocal non-minority in some ways of people who are like, this is natty or bust. Like, no way we don't win the title with this year's team. If not this year, then what year? And, that's not the way to think about college football. Texas could get to the national title game and lose on a, last second touchdown, the way they beat USC in 2005. So it shouldn't be that way, but clearly, yes. I mean, it's Arch Manning, it's Colin Simmons, Trevor Gooseby, Cam Coleman. Those are 5 top 12 picks probably this next year. If you can't do it with those guys, then who next? And he could go win it with a less talented roster. It could happen. But I don't think that's fair to Sarkisian, but it is important to set expectations high because, A, he's got them high for himself, and B, 9-3 is not acceptable with the level of investment Texas has in their team. They have to be in the playoffs every year. And when you have a cycle like this one coming around in 2026, it really has to be SEC title game contention and college football playoff championship contention.
Do you think if they lose to Ohio State again this year, Evan, that they're going to miss the playoff? Because I kind of do, man. Like, as brutal as that is, I don't see them only losing one game on that SEC schedule at Tennessee, at Mizzou, at LSU, at A&M. You get Florida and then Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. I think they lose at least 2 of those games. And I think if they lose to Ohio State again, they're going to be on the outside looking in. Do you feel the same way that really the whole season yet again comes down to the Buckeyes?
I mean, PJ, this might be the most important week 2 game ever for any team, either side, really. I mean, Ohio State, I think it's kind of like you just feel like you're going to write them in, but they have an extremely tough schedule. And if they just, lose 3 games to 3 really good teams that could all capably beat them, suddenly they're not in the playoffs. So, Texas, this is a huge recruiting weekend for them. I mean, the 2028 class, Easton Royale is going to be there. You make a great point. It is very hard to look at this SEC schedule and say they're going to win all but one game and just get through it that easily. I think Texas will be favored in every game they play this year, barring something random happening. They get the home field for Ohio State, and it's week 2 now, Arch Manning. They're going to have the hype there. I think they're going to be favored in their rivalry games. Depending on how good LSU is, maybe LSU is favored at home. But so you could just say, like, they're the best team in 12 games or tied for the best, but have a home field advantage for all of them. And that's why they should be able to win every game. But that's not how college football works. That's not how I think the toughest schedule of any contender in the country. That's not how it's going to work when you're playing that kind of teams week to week. So week 2, Ohio State, it's a must win. It really is. And it feels weird to say an out of conference game is a must win for a team, but it just opens up so much more for your schedule when you can just get that monkey off your back of, they have an Ohio State and Georgia problem under Steve Sarkisian so far. It's, every other team they really don't lose much to apart from those two. So, they've got to go and see that win happen, get the momentum started. And then, it would be very unlikely for them to go 6-0 in 3 years against their rivals. I mean, I just don't think that Mike Elko is the kind of coach that loses to a rival 3 times in a row. He's a really good coach. Oklahoma, I think this is a better team they had last year. And Texas has gotten lucky with the quarterback situation with Oklahoma in the last 3 seasons. Like, I'll admit it. I mean, it has been 24 and 25. And even 22 as well, 3 of the last 4 when they've won. The quarterback situation had an asterisk with it, either a major injury or going through changes, or John Mateer's thumb thing was a little overblown, but clearly affected him a little bit. That I think LSU is the loss in the SEC schedule. Tennessee still matters. Ole Miss, Florida. I mean, just going through the list, they play like 8 top 25 teams. So you're right. You're completely right. That's a long way of saying that's a good take to say, like, it is a must win week 2.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Texas last year. They went 2-3 on the road. Their 2 wins were in overtime against Kentucky and Mississippi State, right? So we know life on the road in the SEC is not easy. Evan, before I let you go, in about 30, 40 seconds, your prediction for Texas this season. Do they get to the playoff, and how far do you think they go?
Yeah, I think this is an 11-1 football team, and that's saying a lot with the schedule. But if you're 11-1 with that schedule, you're probably a top 2 to 3 team in the nation. I have them right now losing to LSU and then Georgia in the championship game, which kind of mirrors what Harrison was saying right before I got on. Like, it's just hard to pick against Georgia in an SEC championship game. And then I've got them in the Natty. I've got them in the finals, them in Oregon. I don't feel confident enough right now to take them over Oregon or the one over the other. But those are the two best teams. I think it's two really good coaches. I think that's how it's going to end up.
Very good. Evan Veith, reporter for Inside Texas. Give him a follow on X at Evan Veith. A lot of good stuff on the Longhorns. Big expectations for Sark and company this season. Evan, appreciate the time, man. Have a great season, and hope to do this again at some point throughout the year.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
Yes, sir. Evan Veith, great stuff there on Texas. And that is our SEC preview. If you missed any of it, we talked Alabama, Oklahoma, got a little bit of Auburn with Peter before his connection kind of fizzled out on us 5 minutes in. We just talked Texas and Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Missouri, and LSU as well. So 9 teams today here on Game Day Garage Campus Blitz. My really overall thoughts on the SEC, if I had to pick a winner, I would also take Georgia to win it. Again, they've been to 7 straight of these things. Their schedule on paper is probably as easy as it's been the last few years. I like Gunnar Stockton a lot. They just know how to navigate the regular season, and then when they get to Atlanta, they usually win that game too. So I'll take Georgia to win the SEC. And then my favorite bet in the SEC would probably be Texas A&M under 8.5 wins this season. I think that's my favorite win total for any SEC team. Again, I like Mike Elko a lot. I think he's a really good coach. They're going to have a good defense. They're going to have a good offense. They have a good roster. For me, I think Marcel Reed is one of those quarterbacks that I think is overrated compared to what the general people think about Marcel Reed. Unbelievable athlete, one of the most electric quarterbacks to watch in college football, but I have my questions on him as a passer. And you saw it last year when he went up against good teams with good defenses in Miami and against Texas at the end of the year. A&M's offense didn't do anything, and they lost both of those games. Their schedule last year, A&M, they beat up on quite literally the bottom 8 teams in the SEC, and they only had to play like the top 2 teams in the league. This year, at LSU, at Bama, at Oklahoma, at South Carolina, at Missouri. They also get Texas and Tennessee at home as well. So the schedule way harder for the Aggies. I think they're probably like an 8-4 team. So I like under 8.5 wins for Elko and Texas A&M. That would be my favorite win total. Ryan Horvath going to join me next week. He was out today. He was sick, but he'll be back next week as we'll preview the Big Ten as we finish up previewing the Power 4 in college football. And then, folks, 2 weeks from now, we'll be getting ready for week 0 and then week 1 after that. So college football almost here. Thanks again to all the great guests that we had today talking the SEC. Appreciate you tuning in. I'm PJ Glasser. This has been Game Day Garage's Campus Blitz. We will see you next Wednesday.